Good evening, good morning to wherever you are in the world, because this stream tonight is being watched by people literally all over the world at a pivotal, crucial point in human history. And can anyone still remember February and the extraordinary changes that have taken place since then? A world transformed by a lie, which I'm going to be taking apart tonight. And the question that kind of sums up the whole evening, the whole event, is this one. What the hell is going on? Billions of people are asking that question for the most obvious reasons, as they see the world they thought they were living in disappear before their eyes, as fascism sweeps across the world. And to understand part of that answer of what the hell is going on is to appreciate that the world is upside down. And it's upside down because it's made that way. It was brilliantly described in Alice in Wonderland like this. If I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is, because everything would be what it isn't. And contrary-wise, what it is, it wouldn't be, and what it wouldn't be, it would, you see. And while that may sound nonsense, it actually describes the world we are living in. People look at events and happenings, and they seem unconnected, random, bewildering, especially in the last few months. What's going on? What's happening? Where's my life going? Where's the world going? And the world to most people looks something like this. I've used this analogy many times over the years of an analogy of the world. You put 100 balls of wool in a little room, and you put 100 kittens in there, and you come back 2 or 3 hours later, and someone says, sort that out. Because that's what the world seems to be. It seems to be a jigsaw puzzle where none of the pieces fit. What is happening? Why is that happening? Why did they do it like that? What are they saying that for? But for 30 years, full time, I've been looking at the world and asking those questions. And that crucial question, what the hell is going on? Who is running this world, and to what end, and where is it being taken, and why? And when you ask those questions, who, what, when, how, and all the others, and you're prepared, this is the crucial bit, to let your mind and your conclusions be driven by information, evidence, and not preconceived idea, then the world can look a very different place. And also you can appear crazy to vast numbers of people. They even call me crazy. Extraordinary, but they did. But as the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland said, I'm not crazy. My reality is just different than yours. And we're now living in a world in which it seems to be a crime to have a reality that's different to someone else. And this whole manipulation and control of humanity is founded on the control of perception, by putting people in what I call a symbolic bubble, where they have a limited view of everything. And when you fall for the bubble, and it's systematically constructed, as I'll come to, the world can look like that. Why wouldn't it? Makes no sense. And the world looks like that. A pile of pieces, but no picture. But burst the bubble, and anyone can do it. You don't have to be sitting cross-legged on a bloody mountain. Burst the bubble, and suddenly the world looks very different, and the pieces start to fit. And you know, there is this idea that the definition of genius is something like understanding complexity. But I would have another definition of genius, and that is seeing the simple hidden by complexity. And that is what the world is. It seems so complex, it seems so unfathomable, but actually, behind all that, what's happening is very simple. So, what the hell is going on? First question, where are we being taken? Like I said in that opening video, thanks to Richard and Gaz and Jamie for that, I have a saying, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. Because if you don't know the outcome that's being planned, where we're being led, then these individual events seem just that, individual, random. What's happening? Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? But when you know what the outcome is, where we're being taken, suddenly these random events become very clear stepping stones to that outcome. So, this is the outcome that we're being led towards. And I've been talking about this for so long, most of it for decades. And look at this structure for the world that has been so long planned, and then look at how the world has shifted and changed since February. And you'll see how much advanced this is now than it was then. Coincidence? Not a frickin' chance. So, the idea is to run the world with a world government dictating to every community worldwide, and these would not be elected politicians. They want rid of all that. They would be unelected technocrats, bureaucrats, engineers, people in science, medical technocrats that have been driving this pandemic hoax, and such people. And they would dictate everything that happened in the world. Under them would be a world army which would impose the will of the world government. This emerging European army is all part of that. There would be a world central bank that would dictate all global finance. The European Central Bank is a stepping stone to that. There would be, and my goodness me, I've been writing this since about 19 93, 94, there would be a single one world currency that would be no cash, just digital money. And look at how that's been advanced in the last few months. And of course, that's all to do with control. One world currency, only digital, everything's controlled, everything's kept under surveillance. And humans connected to AI. When I started talking about this a long time ago, this was the agenda to connect artificial intelligence to the human brain, the human body, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. Of course, that David Icke, he's mad, he is, look. But they're not saying it now, because it's unfolding in front of our eyes. And I'll come more to that in section 2 tonight. Under the world government structure would be super states like the European Union and trading blocs centrally controlled. Countries would be replaced by powerless regions, so all starting to emerge already. And we would live in a global monoculture. All cultures and diversity of culture, diversity of way of life would disappear. Global monoculture. What they're targeting now is white people in the West, very clearly. But that's just the start. If they can subdue and bring it under suppression, white people, then they'll go to another group, and then another group, and then another group, and then another culture, until there's only one world culture dictated by a one world government. And this is the structure of it. I call it the Hunger Games Society because, obviously, it's named after the movie trilogy, which portrayed a society in which a tiny few, called so often now the 1%, dictated to the entire population. So the Hunger Games Society, which is the one I've just described, would have this elite few, 1%, whatever you want to call it, at the top. At the bottom, the plan is for virtually the rest of humanity to be in the control, in servitude, and control via dependency upon the 1%. And in between the two, a police military state, that's what they want in the end, that would impose the will of the 1% on the rest of the population and would prevent or try to prevent the population rebelling against the 1%. Now, I'll just say again, because it's relevant, I've been talking about this structure in its many and various forms for decades. Now look at what has happened in the last few months and how this has advanced so rapidly. Again, accident, again, no frickin' chance. And this is Hitler and obviously the time of the Nazis. People get kind of picky. When you talk about fascism, they say, oh no, it's communism or it's Marxism. It's tyranny. And when you look at these different labels, fascism, Marxism, and communism, they basically are the same structure in the sense that the tiny few are dictating and imposing their will on everyone else. And so I'm going to use these as interchangeable terms as we go along through this evening. They may slightly be different in the way they play out, but what they play out is exactly the same. And so when I would describe that Hunger Games Society structure as fascism, Well, let's have a look at this picture. You've got Hitler, one man, here at the bottom. In the middle, he's looking out across his police military state. And at the far side, right out into the distance, you have the population in vast numbers. So let's switch that upside down. And what do you have? Exactly the structure of the Hunger Games society. Because what we are looking at before our eyes, playing out now by the hour, worldwide, is global fascism. And we need to look it in the eye and wait for it to blink. Because if we don't, the outcome is unthinkable. So, next question. That's where we're being taken. So who's taking us there? Who's taking us there? Deeply insane psychopaths. This is a really important point to grasp, because a lot of people say, no, it can't be true because they would never do that. Which is why it's so important to appreciate what we're dealing with. And you know, most people, thankfully, good. They go through their lives, they don't come across many psychopaths and what I'm talking about, super psychopaths. And so they look at the world and they think, well, no one would do that. It's too horrible. But we cannot understand, I would suggest, current events without understanding that what's behind it, who's behind it, are psychopaths of the greatest imaginable extreme. We can't understand why people like Bill Gates would campaign for the destruction of the global economy and the destruction of hundreds of millions of livelihoods and lives, and have no emotional consequence for it. Well, this is why. These are some of the traits of a psychopath in what's known as the Hare test. It's after a guy called Dr. Robert Hare, who was a professor and devised all these, as after researching the nature of psychopaths. And number one, at the top, no empathy. No ability to put yourself in the feelings of those you affect and feel the emotional consequences of that. That's the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior, empathy. Imagine you don't have empathy. That you have no emotional consequence for what you do because you have no emotion. That relates to empathy. That's what we're dealing with. Other traits in the Hare test: no remorse, brackets, see Bill Gates. No shame. Parasites, feeding off the efforts of others. I've just described the 1%. How did they become the 1%? Feeding off the efforts of others. Pathological liars. Oh, I think we can tick that one off. And do whatever it takes to get what you want. And we're seeing that, again, unfold by the day. And what these psychopaths did, they're intergenerational psychopaths, and this goes back a very long time. All the history of it's in the books. Form themselves together in what I call the cult. The death cult, because it is a death cult, for reasons, again, I explain in the books. And it works like this. It's a global web, and at the center, symbolically, is the spider. And the spider operates in the shadows. You don't see it. And the web, or the strands in the web, each one of them is a secret society, a semi-secret group, or an organization that we see in the public arena. And they all form together in this web. And the spider dictates the agenda through the web. Why, how, and this is globally coordinated. So immediately around the spider, you've got the most exclusive secret societies. Many of them don't have names, makes them harder to track. And as you come out from the spider, you then start to meet the secret societies we have heard of, the Freemasons, Opus Dei, the inner core of the Jesuit order, the Knights Templar, Knights of Malta, and so on. And then eventually, as you come out from the spider, you meet what I call the cusp. The cusp is where the hidden meets the seen. And here you'll find organizations like the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, which was created specifically to use the environment as an excuse to transform global society. You may have noticed that one. The Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations in America, etc. And then you come through them. These are organizations that gather together people from around the world in different areas of politics, intelligence, media, corporations, etc., government, to develop a common policy to play out into the scene. And so then we're in the scene. We're seeing governments, we're seeing government agencies, and all these different organizations, global corporations, the banking system, global media. And they appear at that point to be random and completely unconnected, operating in and of themselves. But actually, they all connect into the spider. And ultimately, at the inner core, not everybody who works for them are even close. The inner core is driven by the spider to a common end. And the other thing is that the spider, therefore, has subsidiaries. Like I said in that animated video, it's like a McDonald's, a global corporation. And in each of the countries, they have subsidiaries whose job it is to impose the will of the spider, the global agenda, in their sphere of influence. And I call these permanent governments. I've been talking about the permanent government of countries. There's a permanent government globally as well for a long, long time. And now it's kind of come into common parlance with the term the deep state. Deep state is not exactly the permanent government, but it's a massive chunk of it. And these are the permanent governments in every country that are always there, no matter who's in power politically. They come and go, come and go, come and go. They're always there. That's why the policy never changes. That's why the world keeps going in the same direction. So you have the cult at the top of these pyramids in each country. They work through secret societies to control the finance and banking, military intelligence, the big pharma medical policy. This is how they played out the pandemic hoax. The global corporations, government administration, law and courts. Doesn't mean they control every judge and every lawyer. But if they want a case that they have to win, or if they have a case that they have to win, they put a judge that's safe in there to make sure they get the result they want. And then there's the media and Silicon Valley, which is owned by the cult. Indeed, Silicon Valley, in terms of the major communication platforms, was created by the cult. And then you have the here today, gone tomorrow politicians. Come and go, come and go. And the idea to stop us seeing that is to focus our attention. We're going to fight. Are you left or right? Do you love Trump or hate Trump? So it goes on. And it's a scam. And it's a smokescreen. Because in every country, this is the American example, this is what politics is really like. In America, in the Republican Party, in the shadows, not even in the shadows often, you have a group called neocons or neoconservatives, and they control the Republican Party and the Republican president. Over on the Democratic side, you have what I call the democons, similar group which control the Democratic Party and the Democratic president. And this is the key. You go one step back into the shadows, and the neocons and the democons are answering to the same master, the hidden hand, the cult. Therefore, these come and go, come and go, come and go, and people argue about it and fight about it. But the same permanent government agenda unfolds no matter. And I think this sums it up. The world is controlled by psychopaths and run by idiots. You may have noticed the quality of politicians today, but it's not even run by them. It's run by other elements of the permanent government, like the government administrators. And these pyramids of hierarchical control, with the cult at the top, are compartmentalized, just like a secret society. This is Freemasonry, obviously. And in the 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, the vast majority of Freemasons are on the bottom three levels of degree. And you only go up the pyramid if you are acceptable to the level above you. And all information is compartmentalized. And at the top, you have the few who know how it all fits together. This is exactly how these pyramids of government and other institutions of power operate. Now, people say they have no power, but they have the power. Collectively, we have the power. But what does humanity do? It gives it away. It gives it away all the time to authority. You know why it gives power away to authority? Because it thinks authority has power. It doesn't. It has our power, which we give to it. My God, in the last few months, has that not been blatantly obvious? So here we have a simple graphic of how the few, the spider, can impose its will on the entire human population, as it has done so obviously in recent times. At the top, you've got the inner circle of the cult. This is in a country and in the world in general. It imposes its will on the next level down, which acquiesces to the imposition. And it then imposes that on the next level, which acquiesces to the imposition. And very soon after you come down from the cult, you're meeting levels of the pyramid that don't even know there's a cult. They just, we've been told from on high, I guess we better do it. And so it comes down the pyramid, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, until you reach the population. And if we then acquiesce to the level that's imposing on us, like governments and law enforcement, etc., then we create or complete a circuit from the cult inner circle to the population, which allows the cult inner circle to impose its will on the entirety of humanity. And that is how the last few months have been possible. Follow the herd. Everyone else does. Just follow the one in front. Don't question. So how are they taking us there, these super psychopaths? Well, through control of perception. Perception is everything. What we perceive dictates our behavior. Control what people perceive, you control their behavior. And so the human unfolding of experience we call life is basically a download of perception from cradle to grave. The idea is to hold people in these bubbles and of perception, and there are various techniques, including this one, which are designed to fiercely and totally dictate perception through manipulation. I came up with this phrase, problem, reaction, solution, and no problem, reaction, solution, back in the 90s to describe one of the most effective and most used of manipulation techniques. It goes like this. You want to change the world or change a country in a way that you know that if you just say openly, this is what we're going to do, you're going to get pushback. So you don't do that. You create a problem. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be an economic collapse. Could be a virus. And through an unquestioning media, you tell the population what you want them to believe about the problem, who did it, why it happened, but not that you've orchestrated it. And at point two, you're looking for a reaction from the public of fear, of outrage, of do something. And then you, who've covertly created the problem and got that reaction, then openly offer the solutions to the problems you have yourselves created. And these solutions advance the agenda you'd never have got away with without the problem. Pandemic, I rest my case. And then there's no problem, reaction, solution, which I say, pandemic, I rest my case, for reasons I'll come to, where you don't need a real problem, you just need the perception of one. From the perception of a problem, do something. Solution, advance your agenda. And there's this motto, this Latin motto for the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos and offer the order, your order, out of the chaos. And its stablemate is what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, where you go forward with your agenda as fast as you can, but not in too big a steps that enough people start to see what's happening. That's changed with this pandemic, where they've moved very quickly, but before that it was just kind of steps, not too big. Don't alert them to the fact they're all connected. And so you're at A and you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in too big a leaps, people might go, what's going on? So you go in little steps, fast as you can, but not too big as you alert people. Globalization, the centralization of power in all areas of our lives, has been the totalitarian tiptoe to that structure of the Hunger Games society that I was talking about. And so of wars. Wars are wonderful if you want to change society globally or nationally irreversibly. Nothing does that better than a war. So it's what I call creative destruction. That's why we have so many wars. You have a status quo, you want to change it because you want to move on towards your goal. So you have a war. The war transforms that status quo and you create another one. Then you have another war and that breaks that, changes that status quo, and you go to another one. This is what happened through the 20th century. And every time centralization of power moved forward incessantly because of it. And then there's the question, how did I know that current events were coming in terms of the fascist rollout? How did I know this decades ago? How did Aldous Huxley in Brave New World in 1932, how did he know so much of what's happening now? Very much, as I will talk about later. How did Orwell know in 1948 with 1984? How did other people I quote in my books, insiders who've described the future and been proved right, how did they know? Because these are not random events that we're looking at. These have been planned for a very, very long time, because we live in a world, yes, well, kind of, but there are two worlds within that world. There is the world of the cult, and there's the world of the public. And the world of the cult and the public are divided overwhelmingly by one thing: knowledge. Another way of putting it, information. So they don't have a network of secret societies for a bit of a laugh. Oh no, let's have a bit of fun. Let's have a secret society. They have secret societies to keep secrets. And those are the secrets I'm going to be unfolding all night, right to the end, that they don't want people to know. But they pass on advanced knowledge, not least about the nature of reality and the nature of the agenda that they've been passing through the generations. Through these secret society networks, especially the inner core. And the idea is to keep the public ignorant of that information. And therefore, if you can uncover the projected agenda of the cult and nothing intervenes to stop that, the whole point of what I do, then by saying this is the cult agenda, you're actually predicting the future, unless there is an intervention. And that's what Orwell and Huxley were doing. So I'll go through the books over the last 30 years to the latest one, The Answer. You look at 1984, you look at Brave New World, and you see the stream of this is coming, this is coming, this is coming, but the future is now. The time is now. We're here. It's not some time over the rainbow anymore. We're living it. And never more so than with this, the pandemic, rightly dubbed the plandemic, because it's been so long planned. This is the Rockefeller Foundation. They produced a document in 2010 which was describing a global pandemic, and in all the major elements, including the involvement of China, it's what's unfolded. Why? Because the Rockefellers are in this, no, not to here, to here. It was the Rockefellers that created the World Health Organization, which is driving this global agenda of imposition through a fake pandemic. It was the Rockefellers who were big time, like the Gates family, into eugenics, still are. And it was the Rockefeller family who paid for a whole floor of a German university for Ernst Rudin, Hitler's race purity expert and eugenicist. This is the Rockefeller operation that, with Gates and others, is driving the pandemic hoax and all that goes with it, including so many people dying, not least old people that wouldn't otherwise have done so, and not from COVID-19 either. We had Bill Gates, like I say, very close to the Rockefeller family. In fact, I've seen genealogy that if you go back far enough, those two families fuse. And his father particularly was big time involved with the Rockefellers. And in 2015, Bill Gates prophesies that there would be a pandemic. And what Gates does, quite a few of them do it actually, they tell you what's coming, but in the guise of making predictions. And then, weeks before the, quote, pandemic was declared, there was a simulation of a coronavirus global pandemic. It involved the Bill Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, very close to Bill Gates, and just a massive front for the 1%. And it involved the Johns Hopkins University medical operation, which since then has been counting the fake figures, which the media have been repeating without question. And they produced this simulation of a coronavirus pandemic weeks before it is said to have been kicked off in China. Certainly in public it was kicked off in China. Anyway, and what that simulation portrayed and what was said and how the reactions unfolded, you can see it on the internet, was just a mirror of what has happened since, for real. And look at what has happened to society as a result of what has happened with this pandemic. We have gone so fast towards this Hunger Games society. So, how did they pull it off? How did they scam the world? Well, this is why I've started off talking about this cult web, because only by appreciating its existence can we understand how they pulled it off. So, China, I'll come to that in a minute, massive center for this cult. This Chinese government, wholly owned subsidiary of this cult. They have obviously cult control in Italy, which was fundamental. They control Gates. When Gates speaking, the cult is speaking. They control, indeed, created Big Pharma. Scalpel and pharmaceutical drug medicine was visited upon the world by John D. Rockefeller, the oil tycoon, who also, by the way, gave us, certainly in America, the education system that we have today, indoctrination system. They control the World Health Organization, not least through Gates, its biggest funder. They control the media. They control Silicon Valley, big tech. They control the national medical systems, and they control law enforcement via the governments they control. So everything they needed to pull off this global scam and the structure was there. So we come to China. It's no accident that it started off in China, or that people like the Rockefellers said, oh yeah, we're going to look at a pandemic, and it started in China. Because the cult was behind the Mao Revolution. And behind the walls of tyranny in China, systematically, they have incubated the system, the model for human control that they want to play out globally. Now, in the West, not now, but up to recent times, in the West, they've still had to pay lip service to the fact that we've got freedom and democracy. So they've been able to move slower in terms of their tyranny. But in China, what we say That's what happens. So it's been able to move fast. And they've taken this Chinese model and they've incubated it, and now they want to play it out across the world. And that's why, what's happened to the West since this pandemic hoax kicked off? It's become more and more like China. That's why. China today, I've been saying this again for decades. If you want to know what's planned for the West tomorrow, look at China today. With all its fundamental control systems. And then you've got the World Health Organization, which is owned by Gates, who is owned by the cult. And that's been the central driving force for the global pandemic hoax. And I'll just give you a very simple example of how it works. But this is playing out all the time. Children over 12 should wear face masks to combat COVID, says World Health Organization. They just announced that out of nowhere. Days later, probably no more than 48 hours, Scottish high schools to introduce new face coverings, says the tin pot dictator Nicola Sturgeon. Why, pray? She was acting in response to new guidance from the World Health Organization. This is how it works. The World Health Organization says, this is our guidance. In other words, this is what Gates has told us to say. And then the governments just introduce it. And a few people can't control the world. Hello? And then, straight after that, Boris abandons advice against pupils wearing face masks in schools. Why the U-turn, Boris? Because of new guidance from the World Health Organization. And this is what is happening in every country all over the world, bar a tiny few. So Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization, excuse me for laughing, it is just a title, who's owned by Gates. He's been on the board of a couple of organizations Gates funds before he became Director General of the World Health Organization. So, countries must isolate, test, treat, and trace. And that's what the countries do. And every day, it seems there's another warning and another recommendation from the World Health Organization, which governments then follow. Gates, biggest funder of the World Health Organization, now Trump has pulled American funding. And he has fantastic financial connections to the people all around the world that in the different countries are imposing the centrally dictated policy on their population. Connections to Ferguson, the modeler, to Chris Whitty, Chief Medical Officer in Britain, to Anthony Fauci, who's been a central player in the policy in America, and so on and so forth around the world. Ferguson produced the models that cause lockdown based on infantile projections. Whitty, Fauci, Birx, all big financial connections to Gates. And so what happens in every country, this is the British model, you have the cult at the top, they control medical policy, and then they play it down the pyramid of the medical system, and the doctors and medical staff just do as they're bloody told. They created, never mind, own Big Pharma, which is producing the vaccine. And they created, in truth, Facebook, Google, YouTube, as it's through its ownership of by Google, and Twitter and all these platforms. And this is how it works. You may have noticed, I have, funnily enough. This is the scam, and to know how the web works is to understand the nature of the game. The cult owns the World Health Organization through Gates, and the World Health Organization gives the narrative for the whole pandemic story we're supposed to believe. brackets, load of bollocks, but there you go, we're supposed to believe it. And then the cult also owns Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter, so on, and so forth. And they came out and said, we are going to censor anyone that is questioning or challenges the World Health Organization version of events. So they control the narrative and they control and suppress the exposure of the lies in the narrative. And the coordination is the cult web. So, we were told that this whole pandemic, by the way, the pandemic that was declared a pandemic by Tedros, who's not a doctor, by the way, although he's got a doctor in front of his name. He's not a medical doctor at all. He's a crook, actually, criminal from Ethiopia. Well, we were told that it started in a wet market in Wuhan. And another story that has emerged is that it was released on purpose by the Chinese government from a top level known as Biosafety Level 4 biolab in Wuhan. I personally don't buy either explanation. The wet market is, well, wet in terms of the story. But the Wuhan biolab, we're supposed to believe that some deadly pathogen was released by this biolab. And by the way, I'm not dismissing for a second that something like that might be in the script coming forward. Don't dismiss that for a second. In fact, Gates, who tends to tell you what's coming in the, like I say, in the guise of prophecy, has said he thinks pandemic 2 will be the release of a pathogen from one of these biolabs. So I wouldn't rule it out for a second, not for a second. Wouldn't surprise me. But where I stand now and what we've experienced so far, don't buy it. Not least because the virus is not deadly or anything like deadly in the sense of being released from a deadly biolab in Wuhan. Show me the sick people that there would be with that. Show me the dead people there would be with that. And then show me the figures, which I'm going to come to, of how this whole thing has been scammed in terms of cases and deaths. This week I watched an interview with this Chinese virologist on American television who said that she was a whistleblower and that this very dangerous virus had been released on purpose and it was human-made and wasn't natural. But where the story breaks down every time is that this alleged virus is not very dangerous. It isn't. You'll see as we go along if you've not looked at it before. So China, however, was fundamentally involved in this sense. It is the blueprint not only for the control of humanity globally, it was the blueprint for the response globally to the pandemic. And what they had to do was make sure that the way China responded to it, all planned long ago, was the way the rest of the world would respond to it. So, we started seeing in those early days pictures coming out of China that would frighten a lot of people. But that was the idea. And then we have another one. Do you remember, we saw these pictures of people just keeling over in the street from this virus? Anyone seen that happen in the West with the same virus? Bit strange. And then, again, with this blueprint, the response, we saw these absolutely draconian measures of people locked down, forced from their houses, others locked away in their houses. Some even died of starvation, the reports claim, because they couldn't get out. And we had new hospitals being built. Remember that? Hospitals built in like 10 days in China. Oh, it's terrible. It's virus. Oh, my God. And then we had the draconian lockdown in response. This was all planned because this was going to be global very soon. We had social distancing in those early days, which has become part of life in the West now. We had child programming that we're now seeing unfold in the schools around the West. And we had the coronavirus surveillance, how China is tracking its citizens, which we now have unfolding in the West. But as far as China goes, suddenly, cue Freddy. It's a kind of magic. It's a kind of magic. Wuhan eases coronavirus lockdown as restrictions intensify outside China. All 16 temporary hospitals in Wuhan closed. China, 0 new local cases as medics return home. As it went across the West, or we told it was, China, whoa, hey, it's party time. This is Wuhan today. They're talking about a second lockdown in the West and all this stuff. Can't do here, can't do that, can't see them. It's party time in Wuhan. This is just like 10 days, 2 weeks ago. This is Wuhan social distancing. The die was cast. The blueprint was set. Now, the West is going to have it. And so you would expect that the criminal voice box of Bill Gates, Tedros, would say, the Chinese government is to be congratulated for the extraordinary measures it has taken to contain the outbreak. China is exactly setting a new standard for outbreak response, and it is not an exaggeration. Is that all right, Mr. Gates? Was that good? Yes, Tedros. Now make the tea. So, yes, China was the blueprint. Why? One reason why. Lockdown was planned for the West to vastly advance the Hunger Games society. So we had the puppeteer and the puppet. He's been on the board of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, created by Bill Gates, the Global Fund, and then he becomes Director General of the World Health Organization to do whatever Gates tells him. Gates also close to the Chinese leadership, and Gates started not only praising China for its actions, but then saying, as with this case with India, lockdown is the way to save us from the virus. Think of all those lost jobs and destroyed lives. Yes. And there's Professor Neil Ferguson, who would provide the excuse for just that. One has to adopt the kind of community measures which have been adopted in places like Wuhan and China, where you try to reduce contacts between people in the community. Song sheets all round, please. Why? Why would they do this? This is why they would do it. Problem, reaction, solution. Actually, no problem, reaction, solution, as I'll come to. To impose a global vaccine where the contents were known before they played the scam. This is why they're pulling it out so fast, ludicrously fast. I'll come to that actually in section 2, because the Gates vaccine has to be connected into something else. Surveillance state. and trace, that's what's happening. And destroy independent income. Crucial. This is the reason for lockdown. If you are going to have this structure where a few are dictating to the entire population because the population is in dependence for its survival upon the few, you have to destroy the independent livelihoods in terms of business and in terms of employment with those businesses, because while they exist, they are not dependent upon you. And you want dependency because you know that means control, so you have to destroy independent livelihoods, independent businesses, independent employment. That's why we've had lockdown. That's why it's made no sense in terms of health. And just give you an idea of how big this lie is. It's breathtaking. You know, the Nazis were fantastic at one thing: propaganda, perception, manipulation, rewiring behavior. And this was one of their scams which Hitler talked about. If you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. The bigger the lie, the more will believe it. Why? Because people will accept that authority lies. Oh yeah, the politicians lie, oh yeah. But they won't conceive, in vast numbers anyway, the scale of those lies. Oh yeah, they'd lie, but they wouldn't lie that much. What? Telling monumental whoppers is the calling card of psychopaths, pathological liars.